Radio 2.
We all flew from Idlewild in New York to Heathrow, and we're marveling the whole time because it was fun.
That was my very first time to ever fly overseas. It seems like, in those days they didn't have jets. They had those gasoline motors, and it always scared me when I'd get in the plane and look out the window and see the fire coming out of the exhaust. But yeah, it seems like we had kind of a bumpy flight, and it was long. It seemed like it took us forever to get from New York to London.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day when I die.
The person here is Jerry Allison. He's the drummer for the Crickets, and then Joe Malden.
We didn't know the British audience would receive us any differently than the U.S. audiences did or had.
We probably didn't think about the fact we were one of the first rock and roll acts. I'm glad we didn't ask anybody what the English fans were like, because they were a pleasant, nice surprise.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day when I die. Well, that'll be the day. Ooh, ooh, that'll be the day. Ooh, ooh, that'll be the day. Ooh, ooh, that'll be the day.
March 1958 saw the arrival in the UK of a young Texan rock and roller and his band for a tour which would have a profound influence and directly inspire a whole generation of British musicians. They were Buddy Holly and the Crickets. This will be Buddy's only visit to these shores, but during that month he did 25 dates with over 50 shows and 3 TV appearances. He formed an eternal bond with his British fans. Hello, I'm Joe Brown, and for the next hour we take a unique look back at that tour through the memories of the Crickets, those who worked with him or were fortunate enough to meet him. This is Buddy in Britain.
All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the whole world can see that you were meant for me. All of my life I've been waiting, tonight there'll be no hesitating, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the whole world can see that you were meant for me. Stars appear and the shadows are falling, and you can hear my heart calling. A little bit of loving makes everything right, and I'm gonna see my baby tonight. All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the world can see that you were meant for me. Dum dum dum, oh boy, dum dum dum, oh boy. You don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the world can see that you were meant for me. All of my life I've been waiting, tonight there'll be no hesitating, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the world can see that you were meant for me. Stars appear and the shadows are falling, you can hear my heart calling. A little bit of loving makes everything right, and I'm gonna see my baby tonight. All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. Oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy. Oh boy, the whole world can see that you were meant for me.
Buddy and the Crickets were at the peak of their success in March 1958, and while they were here they had 4 top 20 singles: Peggy Sue, Maybe Baby, Listen to Me and Oh Boy. But the tour was unlike any of the rock and roll package shows they worked in America. Here they performed alongside the 14-piece Ronnie Keane Orchestra, Pye Records singing star Gary Miller, a close harmony duo, the Tanner Sisters, and as the programme described him, the comedian with the modern style. Who else? Des O'Connor. Here's a cricket's bass player, Joe B. Mauldin, and drummer, Jerry Allison.
When we got to England, everything seemed different to me because they handled the programming, so to speak, or the lineup of their shows different from the way Alan Freed always did it. You know, his was always, he'd run out and say, and now we have, and then we'd run out and say, and that was, and now we have. In England, it was quite different because it was much more laid back and, for me, a whole lot more enjoyable. I really felt comfortable and at ease.
The Alan Freed shows Joe B. mentioned, we'd get to do 3 or 4 songs, something like that. And when we got to England, we got to do a whole 30 minutes, which was really things. We had all kinds of stuff we were wanting to play. And also we really enjoyed, like Des O'Connor was the MC or comparer or host or presenter, whichever one of those he was. And he was really a fun guy. And we enjoyed just sitting around and listening to people talk funny. And the Tanner sisters on there, and they were nice. And all the guys in Ronnie Keane's orchestra were nice. And anyway, it was a real pleasant change from the rushed shows over with maybe 20 different acts on them.
Here's Des O'Connor.
On that show, there was Ronnie Keane and his orchestra with frontline brass, saxophones, trombones, trumpets, and we couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when they had the sound check about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They went on and played 2 or 3 numbers, and, you know, big brass making a lot of noise. Then these 3 guys set up and started to play Maybe Baby. Well, the sound, it was so much more decibels and much more volume, I couldn't work it out. I think the promoters were just kind of protecting themselves, saying, well, we'll put a big orchestra on there and we'll put some variety performers in, like Gary Miller, who was a real good-looking guy, song and dance man, the Tanner sisters, who were close harmony singing duo, and a comic called Des O'Connor, and we'll give them a bit of variety as well. And they didn't want to see me, and certainly didn't want to see me twice, and certainly didn't want to see me walking on and off introducing people. And my agent rang me up and said, you know, Buddy Holly, I'd never heard of him. So he said he's never heard of you either.
Maybe, baby, I'll have you. Maybe, baby, you'll be true. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me. It's funny, honey, you don't care. You never listen to my prayer. Maybe, baby, you will love me someday. Well, you are the one that makes me glad, and you are the one that makes me sad. When someday you want me, well, I'll be there, wait and see. Maybe, baby, I'll have you. Maybe, baby, you'll be true. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me.
Buddy and the Crickets, along with their manager Norman Petty and his wife Vi, arrived at London Airport, which is now Heathrow, at 4 p.m. on Friday the 28th of February 1958, to a very cold British winter. They'd endured a 14-hour flight from New York in a propeller-driven airliner, which of course was late arriving. This caused problems as they were booked to appear that evening on a live edition of TV pop show Call for Cats, presented by Kent Walton.
Well, the studios were Wembley Studios were taken over by Rediffusion then. And Associated Rediffusion was the first commercial television company, of course, in London, and along with ATV. And our studio that we used to do Call for Cats in was Studio 2 Wembley. But this one, for some reason, took place in Studio 1 Wembley, the bigger studio. And Buddy and the Crickets boys came in late with a couple of minders, a couple of hangers-on, I don't know who they were. And I brought them into the studio, and they were a bit overawed by the whole thing, I think. And Buddy was very shy, very shy, but very nice with everything, very apologetic about everything. He was the one that was saying, I'm sorry, we're a bit disheveled. We're not looking much like going on a show in front of cameras and things because we just come off a plane from the US. But a charming boy, very nice guy, and the Crickets with him, all 3 very nice fellas. They were in a hurry when they arrived, and they were in a hurry when they left.
Miss me, you're gonna say you'll kiss me. Yes, you're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. I don't care what you told me, you're gonna say you'll hold me. Yes, you're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. After all, another fella took you, but I still can't overlook you. I'm gonna do my best to hook you. After all is said and done, you're gonna say you'll miss me. You're gonna say you'll kiss me. Yes, you're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too.
Encore for Cats, they mimed to I'm Gonna Love You Too, which was one side of the new Buddy Holly single released here that very same day. After this first UK performance, despite the jet lag, they were off again, this time to a press reception in Soho, organised by Decca Records. There they met cricket heroes Dennis Compton and Godfrey Evans. They also met, for the first time, the English girls. Here's Jerry Allison.
It seems like it's right when we first got into town. We went to a club called the Whiskey A Go-Go for sort of a press conference, and they had a couple of girls there, and they took photos of us dancing, took pictures of the cricketers showing us how to hold the bat. And I remember one fellow's name was Dennis, and they were real nice, and of course we hadn't heard of them, of course they hadn't heard of us, so it all worked out great.
The cricketing connection followed them around, and after a show on the 18th of March, the Wigan Examiner said, "Cricket's bowled the maidens over." Now, while he was here, Buddy wrote regularly to his parents in Lubbock, Texas, and in his first letter home on March the 4th, he referred to the Soho press reception.
The place was full of newsmen and photographers. They were continually snapping pictures of us. They had some English film starlets there for us to pose and dance with. Oh, they were real pretty. There was also the country star cricket players there, a game kind of like baseball, and we posed for pictures with them. They were supposedly teaching the crickets how to play cricket.
Well, those film starlets were actually a couple of birds from the teen magazine Valentine.
Well, put your arms around me now and try your best to squeeze me. Love me, baby, you know how. Yes, and rock me, my baby. Well, rock like a hickory down. Rock upon my baby. Up and down, around the clock. Well, rock me, my baby. Well, I blend your kisses on my lips and make me bubble brightly. Thrill me to my fingertips. Well, rock me, my baby. Well, rock like a hickory down. Rock upon my baby. Up and down, around the clock. Well, rock me, my baby. Well, tell me that you love me too, and say you'll never leave me. No one loves you like I do, so rock me, my baby. Well, rock like a hickory down. Rock upon my baby. Up and down, around the clock. Well, rock me, my baby. Well, rock like a hickory down. Rock upon my baby. Up and down, around the clock. Well, rock me, my baby.
Rock Me My Baby from the album The Chirping Crickets, which was a big seller here in 1958, along with the LP Buddy Holly. They were booked at 24 consecutive venues across England, plus one in Cardiff. 2 shows a night and 3 on Saturdays. Ticket prices ranged from 2 and a tanner to over 10 bob. It opened at one of London's largest cinemas, long since demolished. Here's the tour's musical director and orchestra leader, Ronnie Keane.
I got a call from Lou and Leslie Grade. They wanted a band to back Buddy Holly. And I really didn't know Buddy Holly, who he was at the time, because I was into big band music. But we went down and we got the job. And we had a rehearsal at the Trocadero Elephant Castle on the 1st of March in 1958. Well, I expected to go there and find some backing music for Buddy and the group, but there wasn't any music. We had to sit on the stand right through the show. We backed Des and we backed the Tanner Sisters and Gary Miller. They all had music. But Buddy had no music at all, just came on. He only had a 30-watt amplifier. Joe on bass, he just had a stand-up bass that wasn't even amplified. And Jerry on drums. The first show we did, about half full, about 1,500 people. But then on the main show, we had 3,000 people in there, and the place completely erupted when Buddy Holly came on. The whole scene changed. The kids were sort of standing up, and everybody was swinging away. I suppose that is when the music scene suddenly sort of took on a new look.
The Melody Maker reviewed that first show.
4,500 fans packed the Trocadero to see the Crickets last night, despite Elvis's new film Jailhouse Rock showing just across the road. This is one of the breeziest packages to be imported into Britain. The million-plus teenagers who have bought their discs will not have any illusions dented.
Many present and future musicians watch Buddy's UK shows in awe at the sound, his playing and the first sight of that trademark Stratocaster guitar. Amongst them were Britain's two biggest skiffle stars who also met Buddy. First, here's Chas McDevitt.
Well, we went to see the show at the Hammersmith Odeon, and we went backstage and I was talking to Buddy about his guitar, which knocked me out because we hadn't seen the Fenders. And at that time, Buddy Holly, the Crickets, were the only people that seemed to be able to create on stage the sound they made on record. And I said to him, how do you get that sound? He said, well, it's the instrument we use and the amplifier we use. And I looked at this amp and it was fairly small and quite innocuous. And I said, well, what's so different about that? He said, well, lift it. And I tried to lift the blooming thing and I couldn't get it off the ground. And I said, well, what's all that then? And apparently the amp egg was filled with sand. Now, the sand in the amplifier, I don't know whether Buddy Holly had put it there himself or whether that was a manufacturer's design, but it really made the amplifier so heavy that couldn't possibly lift the thing.
Some say they put the sand in the amplifier to stop the vibration and to increase the bass. I think it was just to give the roadies a hard time. Anyway, here's Lonnie Donegan.
As you know, it was his first tour, and I went down. I think a couple of boys came with me, saw the show, and afterwards went backstage and introduced ourselves and so on, and was completely blown away because we'd never seen a Fender, and we'd never seen that kind of finger picking done on an electric guitar before. That whole attitude of the guitar playing like an orchestra, you know, filling in top, bottom, middle, side, and all at once, was quite astonishing. We'd never seen anything like that before. And that the hugeness of the sound, because don't forget, I was the loudest thing in Britain at that time, accused of being, you know, the Sex Pistol of my time, I suppose. And the drummer was a complete astonishment, because our drummers, up until then, had all come from the legitimate drum schools, i.e. military drums, and gone on from there into dance band drumming. And I went up to him and I said, what style of drumming do you call that? And as you know, they came from Texas, you know. He said, well, Texas drumming. And, of course, he couldn't have been more accurate, because, as I learnt in later years, it was Texas drumming. There is an identifiable style of drumming that comes from Texas.
Ronnie Keane also heard something special with Jerry Allison's drumming.
Jerry was a different style from anything I've ever heard. It was sort of the beginning of the rock drummer. It sounded to me like when he first played, as if he played on cardboard boxes. Sort of, it was a dull, flat noise, but sort of that is the sound that all great drummers in the rock bands are getting today.
Ronnie was pretty accurate. A big song on the tour was Not Fade Away, which on the record actually features Jerry playing a cardboard box.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be. Are you gonna give your love to me? I wanna love you night and day. You know my love will not fade away. Oh, well, you know my love will not fade away. My love will bigger than a Cadillac. I try to show it when you're driving me back. Your love for me got to be real, for you to know just how I feel. A love for real, not fade away.
For the first 4 nights on the UK tour, the Crickets plus Norman and Vi Petty all stayed at a luxury London hotel. Now, this was quite something for a 21-year-old Buddy Holly and the teenage Jerry and Joe.
We got to England, we stayed at the Cumberland Hotel at Marble Arch, and you put your shoes outside the door, man, and the guy would come by and get them in the middle of the night and shine them. And he's supposed to be when everybody's asleep, but we were awake. So we'd say, come in here, what's your deal? Yeah, and the guy made, I couldn't believe how little money he made. And we gave him a £5 tip, and he said, man, I'm taking off this week. But But he's really a fun old guy. But it's that kind of, like the service, it seems so much better because our shoes probably never been shined. All of a sudden they got shined every night outside the door.
They needed shiny shoes for the second day of the tour because I tell you, they were going to be busy. On Sunday the 2nd of March, they were booked for 2 shows at another big London cinema, the State Kilburn. The first hour started at 6 p.m, with Buddy and the Crickets closing the show around 7:15. Then they had to pack up all their gear, including Jerry's drum kit, and dash into London's West End to appear on the 100th edition of the nation's #1 variety show, Sunday night at the London Palladium. This went out live on ATV at 8 o'clock. Top of the bill that night was Bob Hope, and this would normally have placed Buddy and the Crickets to appear just before him near the end of the show, and after Beat the Clock. But with a second house to rush back to in Kilburn, starting at 8:30, they had to go on first, which is why so many fans watching at home missed the Crickets' appearance and were mystified by their absence from the famous roundabout finale. After a corny introduction about grasshoppers from compere Robert Morley, the Crickets went live on national TV.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye, yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry, you say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day when I die.
Watching the TV that night in Liverpool were John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
The only thing I remember was Sunday night at the Palladium. Used to have a big variety show. And Buddy was on that once, and that was the big occasion to watch his fingers, to see what guitar he had, and to see if he played the chords right, and to see how he did that solo in Peggy Sue, and see whether he used a capo or not. You know, all the various technical things, that was where you got your info.
The Palladium sound for the Crickets, well, it wasn't very good. Legendary producer Jack Good wrote angrily in the Disc magazine.
TV is ruining these record stars, performing to a cold audience of predominantly middle-aged Max Jaffa addicts on the most old-fashioned type show in the world. Buddy Holly had just one mic to bawl 3 quick numbers at a horde of sedentary suet puddings.
Suet puddings, good old Jack, eh? Another future music star watching at home, who would soon form the Searchers, was Mike Pender.
I seen that, and obviously, like a lot of people, was disappointed with the sound. But having experienced the London Palladium later on, when we actually did it, when we were in our heyday, I could see why, because, you know, people just didn't take an interest in sound at that time. It was a visual thing. You were the Searchers, or you were the Beatles, or you were Buddy Holly, and you appeared on the London Palladium. And that was it. You visually, you were there. Sound was secondary.
Listen to me and hold me tight, and you will see our love so right. Hold me, darling, listen closely to me. Your eyes will see what love can do. Reveal to me your love so true. Listen to me, listen closely to me. I told the stars, you're my only love. I want to love you tenderly. Those same bright stars in heaven above know now how sweet, sweet hearts can be. Listen to me, hear what I say. Our hearts can be nearer each day. Hold me, darling, listen closely to me. Listen to me. Listen to me.
After the Kilburn show, Hit Parade magazine said,
This was no carbon copy, this was the genuine article. If you closed your eyes, you could be listening to a recording. Buddy Holly and the Crickets were fierce, strong and exciting.
That same day, the group had met up with NME writer Keith Goodwin and Alan Crawford from Southern Music. After the show at 2 a.m, they all drove around London looking in the car showrooms. At the Newcastle show on March the 6th, a fascinating story unfolded. Joe McHugh was a 16-year-old Holly fan living in Edinburgh.
I used to buy the New Musical Express, and I read that Buddy Holly was coming to Newcastle. Well, actually, I read that he was not coming to Scotland, that the nearest venue to Scotland would be Newcastle. So I immediately contacted the Newcastle City Hall and organised to get myself a ticket.
I did ask at the time if there was any possibility that I could meet Buddy Holly and have his autograph. And they said to me, you know, I need to put this in writing for them, which I did. So I sent off the money, plus I sent a letter, received the ticket back, and a note to say that I had to contact a certain gentleman who, his name eludes me now after all the time, when I arrived, and he would look after me. And I got a train down to Newcastle for the early show. And when I arrived at the theatre, I contacted the guy in question, and he was very kind, and he said to me if I would remain in my seat after the show was finished, he would come and get me. And the one thing that surprised me, there was nobody else there. There were no fans there when I was there. When I walked in, he was sitting in the room, in the dressing room. What I did do, I'd taken down with me a copy of the single Peggy Sue. And because it was on the Black Coral record label, I actually bought a little bottle of what you used to call school white marking ink. And I also bought, I remember, like what we call the old-fashioned school pens, which is like the wooden handle with a nib on it. I said, I've got this record, could you sign? And when I brought out the little bottle of white marking ink, he was tickled with this. I remember him talking to the other crickets saying, gee, look what this guy's got here, and the little thing. And I suppose I was quite cheeky, really. I explained to him, would he please write on the record very gently, because if you press too hard, you'd get a blob of this white ink. And he wrote it beautifully, Buddy Holly, on the record label. I recall the one thing I asked him why he hadn't come to Scotland, and he said, well, the tour had been organised, by agents over here. Did I think he would go down well in Scotland? And I said, no, fabulous. And he just asked me, he said, can you tell me, is Scotland as cold as it is in England? And I told him, I says, well, actually, it's colder. And he said, well, I don't know if I will come when I come next time, because he did find it cold in England. And I think it was such a long tour. I think they were looking forward to going back home just simply for the weather. I mean, the audience reaction to them all they thought was great, and they liked the British people. But I don't think I did Scotland any favours in that particular instance, because by telling him it was colder than England, he might never have gone to Scotland. But there you are.
Buddy was accessible to his UK fans in a variety of ways, as Ronnie Keane and Des O'Connor recall.
Buddy would try and go out to sign autographs and sort of he'd really get sort of mobbed. He had to show his face, that was expected of the sort of Buddy. But he sort of stick him out the sort of stage door, and someone would hold onto his belt. And if the going got sort of a bit too rough, they'd pull him back into the stage door.
We were in a dressing room, Buddy and I, and all having a chat, and just after the show had finished, and a brick came through the window. It's from outside. Missed him by about a foot, and it missed me by about a foot, came between and it landed on the floor, and we were all shaken up for a second, because there wasn't much of that stuff in those days. I bent down to pick the brick up, and there was an autograph book with elastic band around the brick. I think the book was for him and the brick was for me.
Tell me how to keep your love. You know how I need your love. Tell me how you keep the love within your heart from me. Don't you know that I love you? Let me show why I'm too blue. When I know that love is true, don't keep your love from me. If you would say to me today, the time for love is now. Could I sway your love my way? Then I say, tell me how.